What do y'all think of when you guys hear the word autism? Do you think of Rain Man? Or maybe you think of someone who's a little socially awkward and has a really random interest, like penguins, for example, as Sam Gardner did from the Netflix show Atypical. Or maybe you think of someone who just can't quite express emotions and gets really frustrated when they can't say what they're feeling. Or maybe you think of someone who just doesn't understand social situations, even though they're really, really smart. Or maybe you think of a friend, an acquaintance, or a family member. See, when I hear autism, I think of my little brother. I think of how he doesn't do change very well, of how he's really loud sometimes, and of how he doesn't quite get social situations. I think of how little nuanced things escape him. But that's just one way autism will present itself. See, autism is more complex than we all realize. It's a spectrum with an array of symptoms, and there are more people affected by it than we all know. So what is the autism spectrum? Better yet, what is autism? See, autism falls under the broader definition of autism spectrum disorders. And Medline defines these as neurodevelopmental disorders that begin in early childhood and can affect how a person acts and interacts with others, how someone communicates, and how someone learns. But the spectrum just means that there's a lot of different things that go into it. DSM-5, which is the diagnostic criteria put out by the APA, includes what used to be 3 separate disorders: Asperger's, autism disorder, and pervasive developmental disorder under its definition for autism spectrum disorders. And this just means that autism affects different people in different ways. So when we hear someone is on the spectrum, all it means is they display any of a vast array of symptoms. And according to Medline, someone with autism may have problems talking to you, or they may have problems making eye contact. They may have restricted interests and display repetitive behaviors. They may like things in a certain order and get a little upset when things aren't in that order. They may say the same sentence again and again and again, just because they're really excited and they just really want you to know. That's what my little brother does every single time I go home. And even though it's a little annoying, I know it's just how he is. But more than this general thing, somebody with autism spectrum disorder may have sensory issues. They may feel overwhelmed when there's a lot going on. They may have a limited understanding of emotions, and they may not quite get interpersonal relationships. But it could be as simple as they just don't know how to start a conversation. But this is all just the tip of the iceberg. Even DSM-5 doesn't have an exhaustive list of every little behavior tick that goes along with autism. In fact, it would probably be safe to say that there are as many different behaviors as there are people on the spectrum. And this wouldn't be surprising because there are more people on the spectrum than we all realize. According to the most recent CDC studies, 1 in every 68 people is on the spectrum. That means in your freshman chemistry class where there were like 200 individuals, odds are there were 3 people in there that had some form of autism. And that's not always that obvious. See, I did some digging, and I found a lot of notable names that were on the autism spectrum. Of course, we all know Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang, right? But Huffington Post put out an article that listed some inspiring people. It included Alexis Weinman, who was the 2013 Miss Montana. She competed in the Miss America pageant and even won America's Choice Award. James Durbin, an American Idol alum, who is a musician and an actor, is also on the spectrum. Dan Aykroyd, writer, actor, star of Ghostbusters, is also on the spectrum. And Temple Grandin, a professor of animal sciences at CSU and a pioneer in the humane treatment of cattle, is also on the spectrum. And these people all represent how complex autism can be as a whole. And when you look at their stories, they're all affected in different ways. And when you're dealing with something like autism, different is expected. So let's review. Today I talked to you guys about autism, what it's like, what the spectrum is, and how there are so many different people on it. I even gave you guys a list of people who break away from the stereotype that everybody thinks of. So now, when you hear someone's on the autism spectrum, what will you think of?